Our next speaker is the youthful and extremely exuberant Merlyn Nomsa Nkomo, who is a refreshing academic whiz woman. Merlyn is going to run a 5-minute spark session now to instill hope for the future of conservation in Africa. Merlyn, with absolute pleasure, I hand over to you.
Hi, everyone. I have been introduced, and I'm so glad that my predecessors have laid a very good foundation. So I'm going to talk to you about the science of conserving the Zambezia landscape for the future. Conservation has long been a crisis discipline, saving species from the brink of existence and biodiversity that is under attack. And often the resources needed, the capacity and the information seldom matched to achieve effective will and participation. We should be mindful of that in Africa and also in the global South. Conservation has a long colonial and exclusionary legacy. In many places, the approaches, that is fortress conservation, are still mainly used. The models of conservation practiced at different places and times, whilst not panaceas, offer insights to the alternative approaches that could yield better results going into the future. We all have different motivations and values really for conservation. However, we should negotiate middle ground and let conservation science be the forefront of all our actions towards saving biodiversity. In so doing, we'll realize that everything exists in landscapes, including our conservation subjects. The future of conservation is in prioritizing landscape approaches over single species focused research and conservation. The landscapes I'd like to bring your attention to are temporal, spatial, and political. The temporal landscape. To be effective, conservation planning in the future needs to consider the landscape of time in which the problems exist. This can be done by supporting long-term over short-term popular conservation initiatives. Planning for climate change, for example, species invasions, ecological succession scenarios. Also, by having broader visions for sustainability and autonomy of conservation initiatives, ending the dependence on international funding, empowering local communities and future conservationists, and including all people of all ages and walks of life in conservation solutions. The spatial landscape, I'd like you to think of that at the present moment, we do have an understanding of the importance of the spatial landscape. But we should, however, foster action that fits into sustainable interventions at this landscape level, that is habitats, ecosystems, and species range levels. This means supporting transfrontier collaborations, studying interfaces of different ecotones, land uses, transdisciplinary approaches in business, and how to improve rather than to delete land use models on the landscape that do not serve our own values and our motivations for conserving. The political landscape, as we would all have an understanding of. I'd like you to think that, as we have all heard, that politics runs the world, and that the worst person there actually is the politically ignorant man. The political landscape influences the all-important socio-economic landscape, which is so crucial for conservation planning. We need to work towards an Africa that wholly understands the importance of conserving and managing natural resources. As conservationists, we ought to understand the geopolitical landscape, be diplomatic, and forge alliances across borders between leaders and conservation practitioners. We need to make conservation a popular topic with the majority of the electorate who influence the politics and agendas leaders set for their terms of power. We should stop practicing conservation that is a luxury activity for the privileged and tailor actions and plans to the people in all socioeconomic classes, not only to gain their buy-in, but to empower people living with and bearing the cost of our wildlife conservation. In closing, I'd like to impress upon you, ladies and gentlemen, that transformed and inclusive conservation models are possible only if we are mindful of these landscapes that we're in co-creating a better future for our planet. Thank you.
Merlyn, thank you so much. We must move away from fortress conservation, and we are so encouraged by your refreshing and powerfully direct message. The future is truly bright with you as one of our conservation leaders. Thank you again.